Welcome back to another exciting episode of Mind Your Body and Soul. I am Joseph Ward. I'm flying solo today. Tiz is on vacation. He's lucky. So hopefully mine is coming up soon. Remember, you can catch our podcast. We have two things going on now. Our Neighborhood Medical Center YouTube channel is running as usual. So you can, in the search bar, Neighborhood Medical Center, or hopefully you've subscribed already, and you will see the notifications of our new videos. But also, our videos on YouTube has been turned into a podcast in addition to the audio that we already have. So all of your favorite podcast platforms, you will see and hear our information. Remember, this is Mind Your Body and Soul, and Mind Your Body and Soul is an educational podcast that focuses on all things health related to help our listeners learn more about various health topics and information they may not have access to. We seek to inform, empower, uplift, and mobilize our listeners to become the healthiest versions of themselves. And remember, we're on all of our platforms. Neighborhoodmedicalcenter.org is our parental website. nmcpodcast.com is our podcast website. So today, we're going to learn about Florida Legal Services and how Florida Legal Services serves our communities here in Florida, and actually the processes that they use, the background information about the organization, and just as much as we can about Florida Legal Services. I learned about the organization not too long ago. I have this podcast. I was curious, so I decided to set it up. So representing Florida Legal Services today, we have Amy Liem and Cindy Cox. So I'll give you an introduction to both. Cindy Cox received her paralegal degree from Center for Advanced Legal Studies in 2018. She joined Florida Legal Services in 2022 as an outreach and enrollment specialist. Cindy's passion for community outreach and advocacy is evidenced in her former roles serving families with organizations such as the Early Learning Coalition, Healthy Families of Florida, and the Federation of Families. Cindy now works full-time under the Florida Legal Services Connecting Kids to Coverage project. We're going to learn more about that project. All right. I'm on computer. All right. So Amy Liem, she is an attorney at Florida Legal Services, where she currently directs the Florida Legal Services Connecting Kids to Coverage project. Amy has over 20 years of experience representing clients before all three branches of government in a broad range of legal advocacy areas, including access to health care, consumer class action litigation, disability rights, and children's rights. And that's right up our alley. So that'll be great. In her former roles as Florida Legal Services, at Florida, she has served as Director of Disaster Response and Recovery, Director of Policy and Advocacy, and led Children's Legal Services work. So both of these women have a lot of experience and a lot of information about Florida Legal Services. So Cindy Cox, Amy Liem, welcome to Mind Your Body and Soul. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. We appreciate it.
No problem. One of the things I'm happy about this interview is I'm in the realm of healthcare, and I don't think a lot of people may realize, some people may, but a lot of people may not realize how legal services play hand in hand and go hand in hand with healthcare services, because somewhere down the line, the law and the healthcare meet, and they have to intersect, and they have to be able to work together to be able to make sure people get the proper services. So, and also with some of the work for Florida Legal Services is directly impacting people's health. So thank you guys for all the work that you do, and I'm excited to learn more about you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't mind me jumping in, you're exactly right. That is such a key issue, that healthcare and access to healthcare services really does affect all of the legal issues that we work on, but a lot of people don't realize it. And just to kind of step back a little bit, I'm sure many of your audience is aware of legal services in general, but it can get a little confusing in Florida because we have lots of different partners and lots of different programs, and we all kind of do various things. And what we do is we try to adapt to the needs of our community, and sometimes the work that we do changes. For example, with the COVID pandemic a few years ago, we had to kind of reassess and really help different areas and concentrate on particular families' needs. And many people are probably aware of an amazing organization here in our Tallahassee area, Legal Services of North Florida. And they're a local program and are one of our partners and just do amazing work. And they do a lot of some of what people think of maybe traditional legal services type work. They help with housing, evictions, domestic violence issues, family law, and so that's a kind of example of the different areas. And Florida Legal Services, we are actually statewide and do sometimes more project type work. And like I gave the example of the COVID pandemic. For that, we had a particular disaster response to COVID. Right now, what we're working on, what Cindy and I are really excited to talk to you about, is the Connecting Kids to Coverage project, which really is pulling together our healthcare work. And it's a little bit different than some of the work that we've done in the past, that it's not necessarily involves like a legal right where we're taking people to court to make sure that rights are involved, but instead we're actually helping people access Medicaid and the CHIP coverage, which is called Kid Care here in Florida, which very much is a legal right because Medicaid is an entitlement for people who are eligible. So so that's just kind of like what you said. There are so many things involving legal rights and healthcare, and people aren't always aware of it. And the other issue is, and then I'll stop for a second because I'm rambling, but that sometimes it's not that like priority issue, like people who are going through maybe a divorce, or people who are losing their home. I mean, sometimes their healthcare, their actual, whether or not they have health insurance, that's not that priority of the moment. And we saw that a lot with COVID when people were losing their job. They weren't necessarily sick, but but however, as soon as that medical emergency happens, or there really is that crisis, that is when it trumps everything else, or it really makes people have to put aside the other issues. So it does become the emergency. But unfortunately, sometimes they aren't prepared for it to become the emergency because they've had so many other things that they're dealing with. So
Exactly. No, this is going to be perfect because we actually had a chance to interview Thomas Varasic from North Florida Legal Services. So,
oh, wonderful.
So that's going to be great because we have information from them, and then we get to hear from you guys. But because I want to get into the project, but I'm trying to storyline and things. So for both of you, you could have chosen to be a part of any profession, any fields. And I start with you, Cindy. Why did you choose the legal field? What about this field drew you in and said, I want to help people through this lens?
So I've always kind of had a background of working in helping fields, aside from the recent years of being a paralegal, and then now working as an outreach and enrollment specialist through the Connecting Kids to Coverage project. Many of the roles that I worked in previously were, social service type positions that entailed some form of community outreach or providing some type of crucial service to the community. And for me, I think it's just, I've always had a passion for helping people. I've always felt a need to help address needs in the community. I come from a background myself where my parents are both Cuban immigrants, and I was the only sibling of my siblings that was actually born here in the U.S. because they all came from Cuba in the years prior to that. So I fully understand, what it's like to come from a minority position, to be a first generation American, child to immigrant parents. I fully understand how these services are crucial in helping people get to where they need to get themselves established, to give them a little boost when they need it. So that's pretty much my driving force, is just understanding the need, having lived it myself as a child, and wanting to get out there and do something that contributes positively.
Gotcha. Okay. Same question to you, Amy. Why did you choose the legal field over all the other fields of professions?
Oh gosh. Well, actually, I think I have to credit the first person who helped me with health law, or the idea of health law, way back to in law school. I had a professor, Lois Shepard, and this was almost 30 years ago, which ages me. But way back then, I mean, she was researching and finding all these issues on legal rights and things like that were, you know, coming up, like cloning was considered something that, you know, was going to be a hot legal issue. There were things about legal rights, about people being able to sue their HMO, you know, in a malpractice type issue. So it was just really exciting to learn all of these legal issues that were specific to healthcare. And then I was looking out of law school. My first job, I was able to work with the Florida House here in Tallahassee on their healthcare committee, and had another great mentor. His name was Mike Hansen. He was did healthcare issues in legislature for many years and just was an expert in that area. And so I got to learn a lot from him. And one of the very first bills I got to work on was the kid care bill, where they were putting it into Florida legislation to make it happen here in Florida, which to give low cost insurance to kids who weren't eligible for Medicaid. So that was sort of my start, and I just have never quite gotten away from it, because just as we talked about earlier, so much of your life is affected by your health care, by health access. And so to me, it just is that's important thing. So that's sort of it. I've just kind of started and kept with it.
No, that's great. No, I think that's amazing. I believe that everybody has their own skill sets, their own interests, and you should use your skill sets, your interests, your passion to affect the world in a positive way. Whatever you have, you do that. So I'm with you guys on that. All right. So I want to set this question up and kind of use my life as an example for this question. So bit of background: my mother became disabled through car accidents. 2 car accidents she was in. She became disabled in like 1992, and between 92 and 94, we kind of struggled to find services or resources in some of the means that we have. And so looking at you guys' website, you're saying you advocate for the poor and vulnerable. So using my past as a situation, you have a single mother, 2 children who've just been deemed disabled. She's looking for resources to try to help her and her child. How does Florida Legal Services help this particular person?
Oh, great question. And as you know from living this, it's very complicated, because you've mentioned so many things right there. Like, for instance, a person with a disability who is single, you said your mom had 2 children, so that might help with Medicaid. But here in Florida, most single adults aren't able to get Medicaid coverage unless they have a disability. But that requires a whole different process to be able to go in and get disability type Medicaid. So so much of it is knowing what door to go to, who can help with what. And there are problems with, they're sort of like these silos where different organizations, because of many things, and a lot of it is funding, and just that resources are spread so thin that they can only provide, or they're only allowed to provide, certain type of type services. So that's why first, yes, it definitely is difficult. But the one thing particularly legal services tries to do is, although we do have our different areas, definitely try to work together, connect, like constantly referring or seeing, for instance, like our partners, Legal Services in North Florida, or other programs around the state that we can kind of link people to. But in addition to that, not just legal services type programs, community partners like you all. Just to know about the community health centers in town and have relationships with those, so that we know if this person's not able to be covered by Medicaid, what services are there. So it really does kind of require a real broad partnership and network of being able to connect people to the different kind of services that are around. But again, that is one thing too, with Florida, the way we've provided services and the different categories, and just kind of our limits on what we provide, public benefits, that can also make it quite difficult. So I guess I've kind of been I'm curious, would you say that maybe your family was successful, or did you have help, or that was needed to be able to connect you to those services, or how did that work?
Moderately successful. I think for us, it was more on survival of what, the normal survival means than actually being able to fully access resources. We did get some type of help, but either the help that I know of today, I just had no idea about, or it wasn't available then. Because like I said, we're talking like between 92 and 94. So I'm not sure of exactly what services were available in Tallahassee then. But I do know from paying attention then and listening to my mom then and now, the help was moderate. I would say that.
Yeah.
Okay. So Cindy, because you're like me, you're in the outreach portion, and I love doing outreach. So let's take that same scenario. You have this disabled single mother who's looking for resources. You're conducting outreach. What does a typical how does outreach look for you, let's say, and you get to access people like this? So how does, just kind of giving us a picture of what does outreach look like for Florida Legal Services, I would say?
So the outreach I would say that I do under the Connecting Kids to Coverage project can look various ways. We partner with community organizations like churches, public libraries, community health centers, schools, anywhere that we're welcome and we can get in the door and, try to raise awareness about the services that we have available. We're more than happy to partner with these organizations. We attend community outreach events like community festivals, for example. I've done quite a few community festivals out in Gadsden County and Quincy because they've had a busy couple of months with outreach events recently. I cover about 8 Big Bend counties. So I'm in several of the counties between Franklin County and like the Madison and Taylor area. So I'm just, getting out there in these rural communities, trying to make connections with some of the, the community organizations in those areas, even if they're limited, to try to get in there and establish ourselves as a presence in the community and raise awareness. I would say in that case, with the single mom with, that's facing a disability or has been declared disabled and needs some type of resources, the way that I would say we would address that scenario is definitely see if the family qualifies based on income, at least for Medicaid for the children or kid care if they're above income. But if it's a single mom collecting disability benefits, more than likely she's going to be in the income category where she would qualify for services for those kids. And then if while we're providing the services through Medicaid, there's another need that arises or another issue that needs to be addressed. We have so many community partnerships that we've newly established and others that are ongoing or that we're establishing now, that we would be able to, at least we know the lay of the land. We know where these resources are. We know who to refer them to. We know exactly where we can at least direct people to go for the next step in those services if we're not able to address services outside of our CKC project.
Gotcha. So you guys are everywhere. That's great.
Yes.
That's great. So, we have to collaborate and do some things in the community.
Yes,
That
definitely.
would be amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's just get right into it. The Connecting Kids to Coverage project, because both of you sound passionate about it. So what exactly is the Connecting Kids to Coverage project?
Okay. Well, I'll jump in, Cindy, unless you want to. Kind of what started this is we've talked about before, Florida Legal Services, healthcare, access to healthcare has always been an issue. It impacts, all of our clients to some degree. And in the past, we've done a lot of Medicaid type fair hearings when people who are actually on Medicaid already and aren't provided services. They can appeal denials and go through the fair hearing process. So we've done a lot of maybe like legal rights type helping people access Medicaid who are already on it. But over about the past 10 years or so, Florida, which used to be a leader in providing health care or health insurance to children through kid care, and has, gotten worse and worse over the years. And so now we are one of the worst states in the country for making sure that our children are insured either through Medicaid or CHIP. So that was more and more alarming to us. And what we were finding out is that some of our clients were actually eligible and, for insurance or eligible to be covered under kid care, but just weren't aware of it, or were having so much trouble accessing it or going through the application that they've given up. So we came up with this idea for this project a couple of years ago, and we're very excited that it's federally funded through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. It's a grant program that does exactly this to help, as our project title says, connect kids to coverage. So what we're really doing is targeting those families who, for some reason or other, because of barriers or just maybe weren't aware of it, just didn't know that was out there, are having trouble accessing healthcare coverage that they are eligible for. And we're helping them through the whole application process, the renewal process, and really just kind of breaking down all those barriers to make sure that they're covered. And that's definitely one thing that we've seen over the last few years. It has become complicated, even more so in a lot of ways. And there's actually been some kind of a chilling effect type impact on particularly immigrant communities. We've had a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, a lot of legislation that has been anti-immigrant, and there are a lot of families in Florida who are eligible for Medicaid, have every right to Medicaid. Their children were born here, but yet because of some of the anti-immigrant legislation and just efforts, have been fearful about applying for Medicaid. So that's another issue that we're definitely trying to work on, just really doing outreach and education to families to let them know that they have a right to apply, and just to assist them with all the barriers that they're facing in getting that application and actually getting enrolled.
No, the greatest thing about you guys' services is you're available, but I would have never thought about contacting Florida Legal Services if I qualified for the help, but I was not receiving the services that I need to receive. I couldn't access the resources, or I was having some kind of issues. I would have never thought about contacting Florida Legal Services. So Cindy, how do you help to teach this, especially in the outreach capacity, when you're coming across people in the community? Say you and we meet in the community, and I just so happen to vent to you that, hey, I can't get access to this Medicaid, I can't get access to this. How do you go about making sure that the people that you come across can receive this information or even know about this information?
So if I'm at, for example, a community outreach event and somebody comes over and says basically what you said, I would probably gather some information to understand what were those barriers that they were facing, and kind of discuss with them our program services and explain what exactly we do. So, for example, what Amy was saying is the goal of the program is to help overcome the barriers. And that can look like anything from a language barrier. Most of us that are outreach enrollment specialists with the program are bilingual and speak Spanish. Florida Legal Services has access to a phone interpretation service that can be used for anybody that is not an English or Spanish speaker. We can provide these services virtually, by phone or in person, in extenuating circumstances. If the person that we're meeting with, for example, is wary of applying for public benefits because of their immigration status, and they want to do this more confidentially. We will go and meet them in a neutral, safe setting for everyone, and go, find a private space that we can meet neutral and discuss how we can help them kind of dispel some of those myths that are floating around out there about immigration or immigrants receiving public benefits, and explain kind of what they could be entitled to depending on if they're eligible in other aspects like income and residency and that type of thing. Right. What we do is we try to dispel these myths and kind of engage the public as much as possible, whether that looks like, for example, in the fall, I've already got an arrangement set up with Gadsden County Public Libraries, and we're going to host information sessions where people can come out and just come in and listen to us speak for an hour and ask questions about our services. And then we're following that up with 3 more weeks in August of where we'll be there to then follow up and offer the services. So there'll be a little bit of outreach and a little bit of actually providing the services to the community. So in these info sessions, we hope to kind of educate and inform people about, how this program works, about their rights, about what to expect or what they won't be asked for as far as their immigration status when applying for these benefits, and kind of just raise awareness that we are available and the various different avenues that we take to bring these services to people. Because as you were saying, I cover 8 counties. We have several counties from Orange County all the way up to like the Florida-Georgia line, like near Baker County. There are other outreach and enrollment specialists there. So we've got a broad area to cover, but we have the tools to get out there and do it. And we're flexible about it, getting out there and doing it in person or virtually, whatever meets the needs of the people who are coming to us for these services.
Gotcha. And your base is here in Tallahassee?
Yes, I'm based, and so is Amy. We're both based here in Tallahassee. We've got a few of our team members spread out in Orange, Osceola area. We've got another teammate that's out between, Gainesville, Lake City, like that whole area there, in that Sewanee Valley area. And then I think we might have, we cover the Gainesville area, and I forget what was the other area, Amy, that we cover in North Florida.
You mentioned Osceola and Orange too in Orlando, right?
Yes, Osceola and Orange. Yep.
I think all. And just to reiterate, we definitely are still statewide and can help people, online. We have a number that people can contact us around the state. We can definitely provide services to anyone who needs it with application assistance. But those target areas that we chose was because those are some of the highest uninsured rates of children in Florida. And there are the rural counties and in particular, just even with children who are uninsured, those high rates. It's also those counties have some of the highest poverty rates in the county as well. And just to kind of go back to what you were asking about, what you were saying about how a lot of people might not be aware that people can contact legal services for Medicaid issues or when they're not able to get something. And it is somewhat limited because there are that huge need for so many other services. And like we mentioned before, housing, family law, lots of different issues like that so many of the programs cover that they're not all able to provide Medicaid type issues. But the other thing that kind of relates to that is that the system applying for Medicaid, or even that like fair hearing type thing that I mentioned, where if someone's not provided Medicaid services that they should be covered, they can appeal that. That whole process has kind of been set up so that people can do them themselves. To do an application, when you're doing that, you have your financial information, you have everything that needs to go into that application. So it just makes sense that you really shouldn't need a lawyer or even that much assistance to do it. Unfortunately, though, it has just gotten more and more complicated in Florida, and things have all gone online. And a lot of people in the rural counties in Florida, internet might not be as easily accessible as it is all the rest of it. So as Cindy mentioned, there's language barriers sometimes, and that we really don't have that what we used to have in the past, where you could go to your public benefits office and there's someone who can help you when you have questions. A lot of times people are forced to call right now and waiting hours and hours. And I mean, we've even helping clients with assistance are waiting on hold for hours, and so that's kind of what it's become, and it almost does require, particularly in these counties where the resources are so far stretched, to have somebody almost working full time to help them apply in certain cases, particularly when there's lots of difficult issues.
So is it difficult penetrating the rural communities or even accessing gatekeepers to be able to provide services in the rural communities? And I ask that because in the HIV/AIDS prevention realm, certain counties, there's stigma around HIV/AIDS, and if you don't know the right person that knows the right person, you can go with the intentions of doing outreach, but you just be outreaching to yourself. So do you find it difficult to penetrate some of these rural communities to let them know about your services?
So I could jump in here. Yeah, I do agree that there are some difficulties with doing the outreach in some of the rural counties. For example, in Franklin County, some of the towns in Franklin County are very small, close-knit communities. We'd advertised for some weeks in advance before coming out, and being available at the library for full days to provide services at different libraries in Franklin County. And unfortunately, we didn't have much of a turnout. There was promotion on the library's doors and walls, and then online. But in general, a lot of the community that you're trying to reach there might not be using social media tools to find out about what's going on in their communities. We have recently learned that the key in some counties is to find those gatekeepers, to find those local organizations that know exactly how to get the word out about things happening in the community, that can tell you exactly those steps to take. That's something that we've been trying out here newly. It's just trying to get in with some of the existing organizations that really know how to get out there. In some of these communities, it's like everybody knows each other. So the local pastor, for example, might know the nurse practitioner, who might, I think when I was in Franklin, I ran into like an outreach specialist for the sheriff's office. And so a lot of these people go to churches together, or their kids go to school together. And these are really the gatekeepers to the communities that are able to get you in there. And they'll tell you the more unconventional ways of doing things and getting out there. But I think you're correct. Rural counties can be difficult to break into. And there is, in some areas, a hesitance to embrace any type of public benefits, even if their income, for example, met the requirements and met the eligibility standards for getting these services. So there is some hesitance, and it's just good to get out there and kind of try to eliminate that stigma and raise some awareness.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure we understand each other fully on that. It can be difficult sometimes. Now, I also want to ask about your eviction prevention, because we know what COVID did to the landscape of housing. COVID caused some people to gain housing, caused a lot more people to lose housing. We had the eviction mandates that went down. So how does Florida Legal Services in 2023 currently right now help with eviction prevention?
Right. Great question. And you're right. There is so much going on, and it was a bad situation that got even worse after COVID. And again, this is where we are so lucky to be working with all of the great local legal services programs around Florida, who actually can provide a lot of direct housing assistance to clients. And I have to, like, for instance, Legal Services of North Florida, I've got to get a shout out to Mary Rose Whitehouse, who's an attorney there, who's just doing amazing work helping with eviction prevention and defense cases there. So what we're doing is, again, we're kind of project based because we're statewide and work on things. And we actually have another federal grant that deals specifically with eviction prevention, where we are working with the local legal services programs to provide eviction defense. We also have a statewide helpline that people who may not have direct legal services in their area can call and get advice and learn how to respond to the eviction themselves. Because that's another area where, as you said, there's so much, and it's just, there's such a huge need. There aren't enough attorneys. We don't have a right to counsel here in Florida like some other states have for eviction defense. And so much of it is that people are also having to help themselves and do their own defense. And to some degree, we've got a really harsh, kind of hard eviction law here in Florida, and there is not much of a defense. So a lot of, if they haven't been able to pay their rent, a lot of times the family doesn't have much of a defense other than they're going to have to find another place to live or move out. And I mean, that's unfortunate. So part of this project, our project we've been doing over the last couple of years, was also to try to connect people to what was called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and that provided assistance, people that they could actually get federal funding to pay their back rent, and that helped, and it was a huge amount of money, but even that was just a small amount, and that money's gone through almost everywhere in Florida, so that's really not an option anymore. So yep. So that's kind of what we try to assist the need and provide defense and help them with their eviction defense when it's possible. But unfortunately, a lot of cases, it's also helping them prepare, maybe find other funding or connect them with other services so that they can get through this crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is something that has greatly negatively affected the landscape of the country, but we know in our area as well. So did you see how the evictions affected people in rural areas? Is that something that can be measured?
Oh, that's difficult, because I think to some degree we're not really seeing just how much people were affected in the rural areas, because, and that goes back to what we were talking about before, maybe resources are limited there. A lot of those people might not have access to the internet or the things that connect them to some of our services. Like I know we would get a lot of calls from like bigger areas, big cities, Orlando, Tampa, Miami. And I think a lot of that was because word is spread more there. There's bigger like apartment buildings or, big type housing communities where the word can be spread, as opposed to maybe smaller communities where there might not be the big housing or, apartment buildings or that other tenants can kind of help and spread the word. Like, you can call this person or call this organization for eviction help. So I probably would say that the things that we've heard more and more of our clients were from bigger populated areas, but I don't think that means by any way that it's because there wasn't still that impact in the rural areas. It's just more likely that they weren't able or weren't aware to contact resources to get assistance.
Gotcha. And so also, Cindy, thinking about you on this portion, because rural areas, I know in this, especially in these 8 county areas, but it seems like the more west you go, or even some of the counties to the south, you can see the increase in the migrant populations or the immigrant populations. So did the evictions, all of these things, did you see how this impacted the migrant populations or the immigrant populations, and how did that affect how you serve these people, or did it affect you being able to serve these groups at all?
So unfortunately, I can't speak to how that looked for the eviction prevention project, because I started newly with Florida Legal Services last year under the CKC project, and CKC is one of the newer projects that they have. But I can say that just from, just from hearing stories of people that I've known personally, or from doing outreach in these communities in general, even with my project, or even just following headlines, following information that's out there in the media, that it did seem like, immigrant populations and minority populations were disproportionately impacted by COVID and the wave of evictions that happened during that time. So I can't speak to how that looked for the eviction prevention project, but just in personal and professional experience, being out there in the field, talking to people in the communities, it does seem like people in minority groups or in rural counties, immigrants are disproportionately disadvantaged when things like this happen.
Right. Because even with your the CKC project, it seems as if the migrant or the immigrant communities, even in the rural areas, sometimes it seems like they're forgotten, especially since the population is still growing. And so do you find some when you come across, let's say you are conducting outreach, you come across some of the migrants or the immigrants, do you find some of them expressing that they may feel forgotten, or they may feel like they don't have access to services because the population is still growing?
Well, go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
Well, I would almost say that maybe they are more concerned about asking for or applying for the public benefits. There's that fear. And kind of going back to what we said before, that chilling effect with this anti-immigrant rhetoric that's kind of gone on over the years, that they worry that they're already facing difficulties, so to try to ask for services is just going to make things more difficult for them. And really, so many of these families, we have this idea of the terms I think that people kind of use, and there's so many terms with immigration law, but is either undocumented or documented, and people who are legally residing here. And, I think there's this myth that there's people undocumented who are trying to get services, or, things like Medicaid or public benefits, because they are not able to. If you have got to be a legally residing immigrant to access Medicaid services. So that misconception that people have that undocumented immigrants are taking advantage of public benefits is absolutely incorrect. But so what has happened is that's made people who have every right and who are entitled and eligible for these services and who truly need them to help their children are not applying, or they're missing out on these services. And one thing too that it's complicated, and it's really makes things a little bit more difficult for families, is that there are what we call mixed status documented families. Some maybe a parent who might be undocumented, but they've lived here many years, and they may have children who are 100% U.S. citizens born here, and so their children can access Medicaid and apply for Medicaid. And a lot of parents might be unclear of the protections that when they're applying for their child, they do not need to discuss their immigration status. What their immigration status really is irrelevant if they're just applying for their child who's born here and illegally residing. And so that is some education we're trying to do too, because so many families are fearful that something that a parent who applies, it's going to impact their legal or their immigration status and ultimately hurt their family.
I agree. And that's exactly what I was going to say too, is that what you see more of is a fear of even accessing the services, less than them expressing that they don't feel like they have the access to it because of the growing communities. It's more of a fear of being asked to verify their own immigration status. And like Amy said, in these cases where there's mixed status families and the kids are legally residing, they were born here and the parents are undocumented, as long as they're just applying for those services for the kids, they don't need to address their own status, their own legal status, just the child that they're applying for. And so people aren't aware of that, and it keeps them away. It keeps them from reaching out for these services. Another thing too is the stigma behind receiving the public benefits in general is so damaging because, this is something that's experienced a lot in immigrant communities, especially when they're trying to keep a low profile and not try to access these services, is that, in general, not just with immigrants, but in the general population, if you're not getting preventative services that you are eligible for and entitled to, you might miss, the opportunity to tackle something that could become a major emergency later. And that becomes more costly than actually having the public benefits and the coverage itself.
Right.
It ends up costing the state more money, when they have major emergencies and have to go to an emergency room to get some type of stabilization treatment. So, the stigma really is really damaging with minority populations, immigrants. But the general population, that rule applies to everybody. It's better to have the preventative services.
Right. Now, but I thank you both for the way you answered the question, because you educated me and of course our viewers and our listeners about how to use the services, and the purpose of the services is not trying to keep anybody away from accessing services. There are protocols, but there's still things put in place to make sure the people who need the services can get the services, and without all the other things that could run people off. So no, that's amazing. Now I'm glad we're able to have this interview and be able to talk with you about your services and how you serve the community, but also the uniqueness instead of the regular legal process, using, like you said, using projects to affect change and being able to use the law and your legal services as well. So I think that's great. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. So before we wrap this up, can you guys give us the best ways to contact you as individuals and the best ways to contact Florida Legal Services?
Gotcha.
Can we start with you, Amy?
Okay, absolutely. Well, people can definitely feel free. I'm not sure if our direct information is going to be provided, but they can always just contact us directly. Easy email at amy@floridalegal.org, and same with Cindy's. So please feel free anytime just to contact us directly. But we also have a 1-800 number where people can contact our project directly. And that is 1-800-436-6001. Again, that's 1-800-436-6001. And we also have a pretty easy email to remember. It's just coverage, the number 4 kids. So coverage 4 kids at floridalegal.org. And then we also have on our website, that's another easy one to remember. It's floridalegal.org or www.floridalegal.org. And if you just go straight to our homepage, one of the very things that pops, or the very first thing you'll see that pops up in English and Spanish, is how to get assistance applying for Medicaid or kid care coverage. So our website, direct emails, or our coverage for kids emails would be great. Either way.
Cool. Okay. Well, there you have it, people. Florida Legal Services, the uniqueness in how they bring about change and bring about services to our community. I like it. I learned something new today. And one of the greatest things about these interviews is being able to build a partnership with another community-based organization, but also because I understand your organization better. When I run across somebody and doing my outreach that I could see could benefit your services, because of this conversation, I could better articulate to them how you could help them. So thank you both for the great interview, the great information, and helping me better understand how you serve our community.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. We are so grateful. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. And our audience, once again, this is the whole purpose and the mission of this podcast is to make sure we inform, empower, and uplift our community, to make sure you guys have access to information that you may not have access to. So remember, I'm Joseph Ward. This is Mind Your Body and Soul. www.neighborhoodmedicalcenter.org or nmcpodcast.com for all of our podcasts to access the new and our older podcasts. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Remember, subscribe to the YouTube podcast as well. We're on all podcast platforms. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.